It wasn't the storm that nearly killed her. It was the garbage they left behind. The sea had never betrayed her before. For more than 60 years, she had moved through the open Mediterranean with the weightless elegance of something older than time itself. Her shell, scarred and streaked with pale barnacle lines, carried the map of 1,000 migrations. She had survived predators, storms, even oil spills. She had returned every 2 summers to the same strip of moonlit beach where she'd once hatched, to lay her own eggs in the sand. She was memory made flesh, an ancient witness to the slow undoing of the world. But she didn't see the trap this time. It was nearly invisible. Thin strands of monofilament net drifting just below the surface. Tangled with torn grocery bags, 6-pack rings, and slivers of broken bait buckets. Ghost nets, the fishermen called them. Left behind by careless hands, forgotten by time. They caught everything, but never let go. Her left flipper slid through the loops just for a second. That was enough. One tug, then another. The net closed around her like a fist. She thrashed, her body twisting, eyes wide in sudden panic. But the more she fought, the tighter it pulled. Loops dug into her neck, into her hind flippers. Her front flipper, the one that led her migrations, twisted back until the joint cracked. Her ancient lungs screamed for the surface, but she couldn't reach it. The sea became a trap. The water that once held her now drowned her. The waves above her swayed gently, indifferent. Far above, 2 young fishermen, Robert and his older brother Brad, guided their small boat along the calm morning waters, unaware of the life unraveling beneath them. The sun had barely risen, painting streaks of orange across the sky, and their boat, weathered and sun-bleached, moved with slow confidence. They weren't chasing fortune, only enough catch to get through another week. They spoke little. Their mornings were routine, until Robert's line pulled hard, too hard. He braced his feet and gave it a tug, expecting driftwood. Then he saw the first bloom of blood rise like smoke through the clear water. "What the hell?" he muttered. Brad leaned over. "What is it?" "I don't know, but it's big." They shut off the motor. Below them, barely visible through the ripple and light, floated a tangled mass of rope and plastic. And caught in it, limp and unmoving, was something they didn't recognize at first. "Is that a turtle?" "A huge one," Brad whispered. "She's not moving." Robert squinted. "Wait, no. Her eye, did you see that?" They watched as the eye fluttered, weak, dull, but still alive. Brad didn't hesitate. He kicked off his boots and dove overboard. The cold water punched his lungs, but he swam straight down. Robert followed. When they reached her, the sight was worse than they imagined. The turtle's left flipper was nearly torn in half, wrapped so tightly in plastic twine it had turned a sickly purple. Her neck was tangled with fishing line and sun-bleached net. Her beak hung open, tiny plastic beads wedged into the corners. Blood oozed from deep gashes across her shell. Brad reached for his dive knife. The net fought back. Every time he cut a section, 2 more pulled tighter. It was like the thing had a mind of its own. Robert swam up for air, dove again. His fingers bled from the struggle. More than once, he found himself tangled in the same cords threatening her life. Brad surfaced, gasping. "She's gonna drown, if we don't get her up." They moved fast. No hesitation, no questions. For the next 20 minutes, they worked with the desperation of people who couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when they could feel her heartbeat slow under their hands. Then finally, the last coil gave way. But she didn't swim. She sank. Brad dove again, deeper this time, wrapped both arms around her and pulled her upward, his lungs screaming. Robert met them at the surface, and together, they heaved her onto the deck of the boat. She hit the wood with a heavy thud. Her body was still. Brad fell to his knees. No! Don't stop," Robert whispered. "She's still warm." He ran for the cooler, dumped ice water over her shell. Brad cradled her head, removing the last strands of net from her neck, clearing her nostrils with a piece of cloth. Every breath they took was one she couldn't. Then, a twitch. Her head jerked slightly, her eye blinked. Brad gasped. "She's breathing! Oh my God, she's breathing!" They both cried. Not loud, but deep. The kind of cry that comes from terror, slowly giving way to hope. And they didn't stop. They built a shade with old tarps and rope, took turns pouring water across her body. Every 15 minutes, they rotated her gently to keep pressure off her wounded side. Brad cut away the last of the embedded plastic. Robert stayed close to her head, speaking in whispers he didn't even understand himself. She was broken, but not gone. Not yet. Robert pulled out his emergency phone, one of those old waterproof Nokias he only kept for storms, and dialed the only number he could remember from the environmental brochures they handed out at the marina 2 years ago. The phone rang, then a calm voice answered, "Marine Wildlife Rescue. This is Dr. George speaking." Robert's voice cracked. "We found a sea turtle. She's massive, badly injured, but she's breathing." A short silence, then, "Where are you?" Robert gave their coordinates, stumbling over numbers as his thumb shook. He could barely breathe. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was the sick, rising fear that they were already too late. Dr. George's voice cut through it. "Keep her cool. Keep her wet. Do not try to move her. We're on our way." Click. Brad stood on the deck, his hands trembling, clothes soaked, face cut from stray lines. He looked down at the turtle, this ancient, half-drowned miracle. She hadn't moved in over 5 minutes. "She's fading again," he muttered. Robert rushed to her side. Her shell, once dark and strong, was cracked in 2 places. The colors around her eyes had dulled. Blood had crusted into her skin, turning the edges of her wounds black. Her front flipper twitched once, barely noticeable. "Come on," Robert whispered. "You didn't survive all this just to give up now." He pressed a wet cloth across her mouth, gently cleared the airways again. Brad placed a block of ice against the swollen edge of her neck. The engine was silent. So was the sea. Time warped. 5 minutes, 10, a shadow on the horizon. Robert spotted the incoming rescue vessel first, a small, white and orange speedboat cutting fast across the morning blue. 2 figures stood on board, their silhouettes crisp against the rising sun. The moment they pulled alongside, a man in a red vest jumped aboard their boat. Dr. George. He didn't waste time. "What's her name?" Robert blinked. She doesn't have one." Dr. George looked at them. "She does now. She's Hope." He kneeled by her side, fingers tracing along her neck, her flipper, the broken shell. "She's septic," he said, "but alive. You boys did everything right." Then to his assistant, "Set up the carrier. Celine, prep the cooler water." Hope, because that's what she was now, was carefully transferred into a large padded crate lined with soaked towels and slow-melt ice. Her flipper was stabilized. The embedded plastic left in her mouth was gently removed with curved tweezers. She twitched again, this time stronger. Dr. George nodded. "She's fighting." Brad watched, eyes glassy. "Will she make it?" Dr. George didn't look up. He was too busy pressing against her shell, monitoring her breath. "If she wanted to die, she would have sunk," he said. "But she let you save her. That means something." The rescue boat pulled away minutes later, leaving Robert and Brad alone again, quiet, trembling, still soaked in blood and salt. For a while, they didn't speak. Then Robert looked out toward the spot they had found her, just an hour ago. "I'll never throw anything into the sea again," he whispered. Brad nodded. "Me neither." Because once you see an ancient life suffocate on the trash you never thought about twice, you never forget. Brad stayed at the bow of the boat, staring out at the glittering blue that now seemed less like a sanctuary and more like a fragile secret. He didn't see waves anymore. He saw nets, hooks, plastic bags disguised as jellyfish. He saw danger where they'd only ever seen profit. Robert sat beside the empty crate they'd used to pour ice over Hope. His fingers traced the salt lines on the rim. Just hours ago, that crate had held cans of beer and bait. Now it held the memory of something that changed them both. "I used to think turtles were just background," he said softly. Brad glanced over. "You know, something you see in documentaries. Slow, quiet, not like us, not like the sea we fish in. But she fought like hell. She wanted to live, and she bled for it." Brad didn't answer right away. Then, "She reminded me of Mom." Robert looked up. Brad's voice cracked. All those years fighting cancer, quiet, but stubborn, just kept going. Neither of them spoke for a long while after that. When they returned to the marina, the harbor master was waiting, tipped off by Dr. George. They were greeted not with suspicion, but with quiet nods and hands that helped them tie the boat. People who'd heard what happened, people who saw the streaks of blood on their shirts, the broken net still clinging to the side rail. One of the older captains, a man who used to mock environmental warnings, offered them a crate of fresh ice. Another left behind a folded note that simply read, "She matters, and so do you." The next morning, Brad couldn't sleep, neither could Robert. They drove to the rescue center, an hour inland, where Hope now floated in a massive saltwater pool, her wounds cleaned and stitched, her flipper in a custom brace. The pool was silent, save for the soft hum of filtration. Dr. George stood by the glass. "She had a fever last night," he said, "but it broke. She's stabilizing." They stood there for nearly 30 minutes, just watching. Hope didn't move much, but her eye opened once, just long enough to catch the light, just long enough to reflect the world back at them, changed, sobered, but still turning. Brad placed a hand on the glass. "You get better," he whispered. "And when you're ready, swim far, swim free." Hope didn't respond, of course, but something about the stillness around her felt different now, not heavy like before, not burdened by pain. It felt like waiting, like breath being held just beneath the surface. Brad stepped back. "She's going to make it," he said. Dr. George nodded slowly. "She is, but it'll take time. Sea turtles don't just heal bones, they heal memories." Robert smiled faintly. "Then we'll wait." And they did. For the next 5 weeks, Brad and Robert came every weekend, sometimes just to sit, sometimes to help clean. They learned how to mix saline for the tanks, how to prep lettuce and frozen squid for the other rescues. They watched as Hope began to move again, first a twitch, then a slow turn, then one full circle around the enclosure without sinking. By the end of the 6th week, her flipper brace was removed. Her breath was strong. Her eyes, no longer dull, followed them from across the pool. Then came the release day. It was early, the sky barely awake. A transport truck backed down the beach slope, its rear doors swinging open to reveal a shallow salt tank and Hope inside, calm, alert, ready. A crowd had gathered, not large, not noisy, just enough people who had heard, who had cared. Some carried signs, some just brought quiet. Brad and Robert stood beside Dr. George as the handlers carefully lifted Hope onto a wheeled carrier and rolled her down to the shore. The tide was high, the current gentle. She paused where the wet sand met the sea, and for a heartbeat no one moved. Then she slid forward, slow but sure. The first wave washed over her. She dipped her head, then pushed again. Another wave, and this time, she floated. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she had made it, because the ocean that once nearly killed her was letting her go home. Brad stood knee-deep in the surf, his jeans soaked, not caring. He shielded his eyes against the morning light, tracking Hope as her silhouette slipped deeper into the waves. For a moment, she vanished. Then further out, a dome of her shell surfaced, just once, before disappearing again for good. Robert came up beside him, silent. They didn't speak. There wasn't much left to say. Hope had done the impossible, survived what was meant to end her, endured what would have broken most. But more than that, she had shown them something they never saw before, the consequence of their own neglect. Later that evening, they returned to their boat, not to fish, but to clean. Brad pulled out old coils of line, frayed nets, rusted hooks, cracked plastic buckets, every single thing that could have become a trap like the one that nearly took Hope. Robert marked the spots on their GPS where they'd seen the worst debris, planning to report them to the coastal cleanup teams. They changed, not because someone told them to, not because it was trending, but because they looked a dying creature in the eye. And it looked back. And when you see that, really see it, you can't unsee it. Brad started carrying a trash bag on every trip out to sea. Not for fish, but for plastic. Every bottle cap, every forgotten glove, every floating wrapper. He took it all. He didn't say much about it. He just did it. Robert stopped using single-use anything. He refused straws, swapped his gear for biodegradable materials, even convinced 2 other local captains to switch out their nets for safer ones. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about not being careless anymore. At the marina, people started asking questions. What happened to you two? You're different lately. Why do you care so much? And they didn't have a rehearsed answer. Just one image burned into their minds. A wounded turtle gasping beneath a net made by hands just like theirs. So they told the story. They told it again and again, at fish markets, over coffee, even at the local high school when the science teacher invited them to speak. And every time they told it, someone else put down their plastic bottle or tied their bait line a little tighter, or just paused before throwing something overboard. Hope became more than a turtle. She became a reason, a question, a turning point. Because when something ancient nearly dies at your feet, and you realize you played a part in its suffering, even just by looking away, you either turn your back and forget, or you remember. And they chose to remember. Every wave, every morning on the water, every small act of care, it didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered. Because maybe the ocean didn't need them to save it. Maybe it just needed them to stop breaking it. And so they did more than just change their habits. They changed the way they saw the world. They no longer treated the ocean as a backdrop to their lives, but as a living, breathing force. Wounded, yes, but still generous. Still beautiful. Still trying. Brad began volunteering twice a month with the local marine sanctuary, helping tag and release rehabilitated sea creatures. Robert created a small exhibit at the Dockside Cafe, just a corkboard with photos of turtles, dolphins, and seabirds rescued from plastic waste, along with a hand-scrawled message, "We broke it, we can fix it." Hope's photo was at the center. It wasn't a dramatic shot, no open wound, no tangled net, just her gliding through clear water, her shell catching the sunlight like polished stone. But for anyone who knew what she had survived, it was enough. It was everything. And people noticed. Tourists who once came for fishing trips started asking to help clean the shorelines. Kids began naming the turtles before they were even rescued. One boy brought an entire class project titled Hope's Ocean. Small things. But small things ripple. And sometimes it only takes one ripple to begin healing something that has been broken for far too long. That ripple didn't stay in their town. Photos of Hope were shared online, first by the sanctuary, then by visitors, then by people who had never met her but saw something in her journey, something that mirrored their own, the need to believe that wounds could heal, that damage could be undone, that maybe, just maybe, the world was still capable of kindness. A national news outlet picked up the story, not because it was flashy, but because it was honest, raw, real. A turtle nearly died in the grip of human waste, and 2 men who once didn't think twice about plastic bags or broken nets decided they couldn't keep pretending it wasn't their problem. It aired on a quiet Sunday morning, and in one small apartment in the middle of the city, a girl turned off her faucet while brushing her teeth. On a fishing boat, On a fishing boat thousands of miles away, a deckhand pocketed a soda can he was about to toss into the sea. In a classroom, a science teacher printed out Hope's photo and wrote above it, "What kind of world do you want to leave behind?" Because it wasn't just about one turtle. It never was. Hope was a beginning, a reminder, a mirror, a single ripple in a vast ocean, and from that ripple, change began to move. Not with storms or grand speeches, but with quiet choices made again and again by people who suddenly understood. The ocean didn't belong to them, they belonged to it. And as Hope disappeared into the horizon, where the water turned gold with the rising sun, Brad and Robert stood quietly at the shoreline, no longer fishermen trying to tame the sea, but men who had finally learned how to listen to it. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Because what mattered wasn't what they had said, or even what they had done. What mattered was what they chose to carry forward. A piece of her story, a piece of her strength, and the unshakable truth that the ocean remembers. Everything we take, everything we give, and every choice in between. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past. Share it, talk about it. Pick up one piece of trash the next time you're near water. because every ripple matters, and maybe you're someone's ripple too.